first thing that I will say is that I, of course, agree that there were huge expectations for this COP. Probably even larger than the expectations that we saw before COP15 when we agreed on the Paris Agreement. There's a context around this, of course, that has to do with science. I think the ipcc report that, or part report that was released in August had an enormous impact. Certainly in Norway, I saw that, but I think also internationally, clearly. It's not that the scientific evidence in itself is new, but I think it was very clear as far as what direction the world is going in, insofar as keeping the world, within the safe parameters of dangerous climate change, and certainly the target that many countries already before Glasgow were aiming at, to keep the warming below 1.5 degrees. So I think that was a very stark reminder for everyone about what track we're on. And then secondly, of course, we are in the process under the Paris Agreement with a 5-year looking into what NDCs individual parties have put on the table. We know already in Paris that what was collectively on the table then put us way above 1.5, way above also 2 degrees, and closer to 3 degrees warming, which is a catastrophe for the future of this planet. So, and last year was the first time these NDCs were updated NDCs were to be put on the table. Now, because of the pandemic, not only was the COP26 delayed, but many countries were also delaying putting new NDCs on the table. So for us, certainly from Norway's side, this was one of the most important parts of why we went to Glasgow, was to help gather some political understanding around what collectively we have to aim for, and also what it means for individual parties' contribution to the global effort. And of course, I think the whole arrangement, the whole COP26 clearly also was influenced and impacted by the fact that the world is still in the middle of a pandemic. Not only work-wise, the effort that people made to be able to travel to Glasgow, but also the way it influenced the way we were working in the pandemic or in Glasgow. But of course, it does influence politics also, and the possibilities for parties to, at this point in time, see a way forward in strengthening their own ambitions. So I think all of this is very important when you think about the context of this COP, which was very special compared to anything that we have done earlier in this process. Now, I would say that my own reflections on what we were able to do is very mixed. I think, like it is for many. I think we were able to do a lot during these 2 weeks. In some instances, more than I had thought would be possible, given the lack of preparations for COP26 because of the pandemic. No one had been able to meet physically to prepare anything. We had virtual meetings in June, but there is clearly a limitation to what you can do in a virtual meeting with 200-300 people logged on to a Zoom meeting. So I think in many instances, the individual work on the negotiations were good. And the political messages that came in as far as the need for ambition, not only for emissions reductions, but also from developed countryside on finance, overall was positive given the the way this started in when we came into Glasgow. I think there's a realization by everyone on developed countryside clearly that we have not done enough as far as providing the necessary support and the promised support as far as the 100 billion is concerned. But I also think in coming up to Glasgow, there had been a job done as far as introducing and preparing a plan for how developed countries collectively could get there as soon as possible. And I think with the political pledges of new finance, not only from Norway, but from other countries, I believe that we should be able to get there in hopefully 1 or 2 years time, and also keep it at that level until we set a new target in 2025. But then we also know that much more is required than these 100 billions. And that's where I think the big challenge is, not only for developed countries, but globally. Lastly, let me just say that I think clearly all of us, I would think, is disappointed about Glasgow not being able to come further on ambitions when it comes to emissions reductions, not the least. And I think we're now searching for, how are we going collectively to get there as soon as possible, because we know we're in a critical century. Not century, but decade up to 2030, as far as, again, the possibility of keeping global warming below 1.5. And I do think that there were a number of parties that could have gotten much further as far as increasing their own ambitions. And there's a clear recognition in that, I think, in the cover decision from Glasgow. And I hope that in the year that we come now, up until our next meeting in Egypt, that it will be possible for also these countries to come forward with something that's more ambitious and get us more in a pathway towards keeping the warming below 1.5. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I'll come back to you again. Professor Alan Miller, what is your